Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a talk video. I've been bringing up additional Tuskens coming for nearly 2 years in almost every quarterly speculation video, but I took them off the most recent one because I thought the timing made more sense for other characters. But here we are. The Tusken Chieftain is coming to the game. We're going to break down his kit, cover the developer insights, synergies, his gear, and the Omicrons both for him and Droideka, and then wrap up with the free-to-play gearing of my roster. What I would emphasize, though, is the faction for ignoring the Tuskens is over. This gives a full set of 5, and it remains a possibility that there could be a journey event at some point that will culminate with the release of Tusken Boba. Timing it around Book of Boba Fett Season 2 would make sense, and it would be a way of boosting the Tuskens for the Crate Dragon raid down the line. CG likes to do that nesting doll effect. For the moment, we start with the Tusken Chieftain, who is a support leader, and this will be a nice upgrade, especially for players who have already invested in Tuskens because of Lord Vader or Jabba, or have placed on that Omicron on Tusken Raider. He's still going to be a superior leader than Aurora, and having a proper leader is going to make a big difference. We're skipping to the insights and strategy tips since CG has changed the order for this post again. I think I prefer covering this portion up front. So with the insights, he halts turn meter trains, major damage over time synergies, and here's the big one, a piece of the puzzle. That means more is coming. Strategy tips, they specifically call out Imperial troopers as a squad that Tuskens will counter, except in 3v3. That's not so much of a big deal. That might be a little bit nicer in 5v5. And the potential of the Scion of Jango synergy, which for me is a slight damper on that Tusken Boba agenda that I have, but it's nice to see that a character that requires the effort and investment that Scion of Jango did, even if it's only in a 3v3 capacity, which I think I prefer because it retains the possibility for these 5v5 options for CG to explore. And now for our kit breakdown, the way that we do, the basic ability, Ceremonial Dance, has a Zeta, random ally assist call dealing 50% more damage. AoE grant allies 2 stacks of momentum, and that will come into play later. The assist call on basic is great. It gives us plenty of options even without knowing what warrior is going to contribute. Each current Tusken offers something because of the effects their basics inflict. Raider has a 50% turn meter removal chance. Aurora has a 60% chance to stun, and Shaman offers damage over times on basic that synergize with Chieftain's unique and leadership. So the assist call on Chieftain from Raider and Aurora is going to give way more control, and Shaman, it boosts the effects from the leadership and unique. And if you apply the Omi, Scion of Jango will be boosting his own stacks of momentum, boosting his bonuses faster. So we're definitely going to want this guy as fast as possible to exploit this basic. With the special token of respect, this has a cooldown of 3, but I think we need to pay attention to that because of the details that we got here with the frequently asked questions. AoE grant Tusken allies 60% protection up. AoE cleanse debuffs and reduce the cooldowns by 1. This ability is powerful. Added survivability, a huge debuff cleanse, and cool reduction on an already low cooldown ability. And the frequently asked questions clarified that this will also affect this ability, effectively making it a 2-turn cooldown. Up next, we got the unique. I don't know why CG changed the order of this stuff. It's on screen, so we're just going to leave it like this. Whenever an enemy recovers health or protection, inflict 1 damage over time stack at the end of that turn. Whenever an enemy takes damage from a damage over time, Tusken allies will recover 10% health. Tusken allies are themselves immune to damage over time. This adds a persistent passive heal. Combine this with the damage over times that Shaman inflicts, and this starts a cycle where the dots will consistently be around and the Tuskens will be constantly healing and inflicting more dots, effectively making this squad even more annoying. The leadership, nomadic people, this is a Zeta and Omicron ability. Whenever an enemy gains bonus turn meter, grant Tusken allies 1 stack of momentum. Tusken allies gain 20% defense and tenacity for each stack of momentum, and whenever a Tusken ally is targeted by an enemy and they have at least 10 stacks of momentum, remove all stacks of that momentum and stun all attacking enemies for 1 turn, which is unresistible. And the targeted Tusken ally gains a bonus turn. For each stack of momentum removed this way, there's a 20% chance to inflict a damage over time stack on each attacking enemy. So as the stacks of momentum increase, the squad will take less damage and be more resistible, and the more they are attacked, the more stacks they get, culminating in an AoE stun. I would expect more momentum synergy from Warrior. This is a nice start, but the damage output is going to be largely related to the damage over times in Scion of Django, so Warrior to me would make sense as another attacker that gets bonuses from the damage over times and momentum. That's a place where I expect to see a lot of synergy. The Omicron 3v3 Grand Arena Scion of Django counts as a Tusken ally if there is no other character that summons at the start of the battle, which means Raider can't be there. Be careful with this Omicron. So again, right now its conditions mean it won't work with the Tusken Raider Omicron or without it. That's clarified in the FAQ. We'll go through that in a moment. I would not apply this prior to Tusken Warrior's release, when it's clear what CG's plans are. For the moment, it's impossible to really determine whether or not it's worth it, especially with Tusken Warrior on the way. It's clear that CG's intent is to separate the 3v3 Tusken squads, one with Scion of Django and one with Raider. We'll talk more about this in Synergies, but right now it's a wait and see, and let's figure out if it's any good before you make the investment, because right now I think it's meant for a squad that doesn't exist yet. We're going to cover the frequently asked questions. This FAQ has a lot of good information in it. We're going to start with the second question, and they dodged this question on whether or not we will get a new version of Boba Fett. But they answer in a way that could still set up a Tusken Boba, giving their criteria that a variant be visually distinct and fill a hole. At a minimum, he's visually distinct. Whether or not he fills a hole is questionable, but Aurora remains a poor Tusken leader, so he could still slot into the Raider Omi squad as the preferred leader down the line, and he could be a 5v5 Tusken leader with an Omicron, where Cheiftain remains the 3v3 leader. And they dodge a question later on whether or not the squad will have a 5v5 Grand Arena Omicron. The next question, there's an important clarification here on the Omicron. We've already addressed this, but this is where it comes up, where the presence alone of Raider neutralizes the Cheiftain Omicron regardless of whether or not the Raider himself has an Omicron. And as we progress through this, we get the clarification on the cooldown ability. This is where it is, where it impacts itself, effectively going to turn it into a 2 cooldown ability from a 3-turn cooldown ability. They explain here that Tuskens will be added to the Inquisitor assault battle. And not really a surprise, but a question that I really liked here is this question on Asherad Het. I do like that someone asked about Asherad Het and CG responded to it in a positive way that could give us a future where he is added to the game. The image here is technically for his father Sharad, but Asherad becomes Darth Krayt. So these characters could create a fun arc culminating in a Darth Krayt release, and that would be really cool. I hope we get to see something like that. I want CG to continue to take a lot more from the extended universe. And we'll acknowledge the final question. There's no further updates and balancing on existing Tuskens. They say this, but I would not be surprised to see some stat sharing or boosts from Tusken Warrior in some capacity. I think they'd still benefit from something like that. So that is not going to really affect balancing or updates in the way that they suggest, but I think there is room for some improvement. With the synergies, there's a series of variables that we should consider. There's the expected split of two 3v3 squads, one led by Aurora, the other led by Cheiftain. And it's likely that the Cheiftain squad will take the Tusken Warrior, but not necessarily. And for the purposes of this, whenever you see the Sith Assassin, understand that's my stand-in for the Tusken Warrior. Alternately, we should consider that we ignore the Chieftain Omicron and just use him as a leader for Aurora and Raider. This could also be Shaman and Raider. That should give a nice short-term boost at a minimum to the existing Tusken Raider Omicron, because Aurora is really a poor leader and Chieftain offers enough synergy that will boost the squad. I'm going to use Aurora over Shaman just because I have him at Relics, but Shaman I think would be just as interesting, possibly more interesting because of the healing synergy and the dot synergy that Aurora doesn't have on the same level. And if you haven't placed the Tusken Raider Omicron and only want to apply a single Ami, Chieftain you could consider with Scion of Django, and then Shaman is probably the candidate I would place with the squad over Aurora because of those synergies that I mentioned, at least until Warrior gets released. This could be an effective short-term play. There's enough dot synergy from Shaman to benefit everyone. For 5v5, the squad is self-explanatory. We only have 5 Tuskens, and Chieftain obviously becomes the leader, but I do want to reinforce the possibilities of a legendary event now that we will have a full set of 5 Tuskens that could lead into the future possibility of a Tusken Boba squad that could take over as a 5v5 Grand Arena Omicron leader. Scion in this case is a stand-in for Tusken Boba, but I would not ignore the Tuskens too much longer. Set yourself up for the possibility of working on these things, working on feats, and being ready for any down the line events that could occur. And we are going to talk about the gear and how much effort that you're really going to need to put in to take advantage of some of these characters. So far, it's not that bad. Now that we have this information available, I am going to take a brief look at the gear necessary for the Tusken Chieftain. We're going to break this down to that Gear 11 staging ground that I emphasize, what it takes to bring him to Gear 12, and then to Relics. This character is manageable, especially with the gearing update. This is not that bad. We have 2 stun guns at Gear 8. That's a lot for a Gear 8 character, but with these changes, that's somewhat manageable if you emphasize it. At Gear 9, we're looking at an additional stun gun and a Chirotech. Gear 10, to finish him off and take him to that Gear 11 staging ground, is 1 additional Chirotech, another Carb paired with a Thermal, 2 Golden Eyeballs, and a Stun Cuff. This is a very manageable character up to Gear 11. The 2 Kairos is on the lower end. Usually characters these days are more in that 3 range, although there are several with 2 Chirotechs. But this is the type of gearing that these days, with the right amount of focus, you could pull off in a week potentially. Now from Gear 11 to Gear 12, this is a little bit different. It's interesting partly because the finishers are a little atypical for these days. Now we have 2 additional stun guns here, 1 Chirotech, and the finishers we see 2 Mark 8 Neuro Savs, and this is a piece that I'd pay attention to. In the past, it's fairly manageable. What you get is usually enough for your roster, but it's a piece that the income is a little low on it, where it can sneak up on you if you're not paying too much attention. The relic finisher. This is a little bit of a mixed bag. On the left side pieces are going to be very easy. The right hand pieces, though, that is going to take a little bit more effort, partly because these Mark 12 fusion furnaces, they take that fusion furnace salvage piece and those Mark 6 med packs. And those are some very high usage pieces and can be a big pain point. It does benefit a little bit from having the Cairo computer, needing 100 of those and not the Cairo prod. Those are more high usage. So this finisher, it's mixed, it's manageable, could be much worse, but I wouldn't classify it as easy either. On the whole though, I think you can take this character to gear 11 to get a decent boost to an existing squad, and then from there make some decisions about what further investment you want to make. Because this character is not an attacker, sometimes you can get away with the lower gear, and you see me do that all the time with my own Grand Arenas. The amount of emphasis I put on that gear 11 tier. Droideka is getting a Territory War Omicron, and this Ami is going to be a nice boost, especially for guilds that place him on defense. It should complicate some of the cheaper counters that I in particular use. I use a lot of low gear counters against General Grievous, my gear 11 Bad Batch, my mostly gear 11 Night Sisters. The big things here are Droideka gains damage immunity at the start of the battle. He gains 1 stack of charge whenever an ally takes a turn, whereas it's just when an enemy takes a turn without the Omicron. When an ally is marked, Droideka gains 25% max health stacking until the end of the encounter, and if Droideka has damage immunity, all allies are immune to daze and stun. While Droideka is marked, allies have additional potency and speed, and the first time Droideka is defeated, and this is a big one, all allies are revived at the end of the turn with full health, which is really going to incentivize you to want to eliminate Droideka first. At the start of Droideka's turn, all allies recover health and protection. Now, I think there's better Amis than this, but this is a good Territory War Omicron, and this really incentivizes using like JKR as a counter up against a Grievous squad that contains this Ami. And we wrap up as we do with the free-to-play gearing of my roster. This is the gearing I performed on December 20th. The majority here, this is going to be related to some of the advancement on farms. I got 000 and BT1 here. Their farms had just started, so I took them both up to 4 stars. And at this point, I've completed those farms. It usually takes me with 3 refreshes, or the 2550 refreshes, a little over a month to farm up a character on a light side dark side node. We finished the farm on Bosch. We didn't have the gear at this point to take all these characters up to relics and go for Jabba. Still took a couple additional weeks before we got to that point. The Trey Omicron, you should put this on. Even with the changes to it, it's still an excellent Ami. The fringe cases of using it as a GL counter, that is not the value. That was a surprise that players found. That wasn't its intended use. It's still an excellent Ami. Took Sith Trooper up. Actually would like some of these resources back because it would have allowed me to take Jabba and Afra to relics. But this is a character I've wanted for a long time. He's the type of player that you want at relics. That type of attacker who's always assisting. He was on my to-do list for a very long time. And I'm in a place where I can do a lot of luxury farms, so we take Ugnaught up to gear 11. Because with these gearing updates, it is a lot easier to make these kinds of luxury changes. And I'm just slowly going through getting my roster to that point on everyone because I can. And it just gives me maximal flexibility moving forward. for anything that CG could do. And once I get this video out, I'll be able to do my Grand Arena. And this week we have a number of changes that you're going to see. I have Afra unlocked, not at relics yet. I could only get her up to gear 10 before I ran out of resources. But we'll be able to see some lower end play, see what she can do at those levels surrounded by those relic droids. We have a number of additional relics because of that event with Sana and Hondo. And I have made a number of adjustments to my defense, planning my moves out for the future. So look out for that this week. Thank you for watching. This is still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. Be excellent to each other.